Hi, I'm James Haddo. In the last video I showed you how to look at the charts and interact with them, and now I'm going to show you some advanced features. So for example, if you are looking at your mortality by procedure chart and you've clicked on the slicer for emergency laparotomy admissions, you may look at your mortality and say, well, who was it exactly that was that death that contributed to my figures? You can actually drill down into the data with any of these pivot tables by double clicking on any of the cells with numbers in them. So here, if we double click on 11%, you now get a new sheet created by Excel, and in that sheet is a table of all the data that is contributing to that figure. So here we have listed all the patients who had a laparotomy, and if we scroll along, we will see on this column here that there was one death, and that contributed to the 11%. And in your version, you'll be able to see the actual NHIs and names of the patients, so you can then go verify that information in your hospital systems if you like, and correct any errors that are in DIVA in order to make your figures more accurate. So that's a really important, powerful drill down feature. And then the next thing is that you're not limited by what's just on these charts, because you can create charts to answer any question that you can think of, so long as we have the data in here for you. So the raw data is in these sheets here, and you could do the traditional way of going into that and picking out the cases that answer your question and creating a count and a table, etc. Or you could skip all that and create what's called a pivot table. To create that, you open up a new sheet and go to the Insert ribbon and click Pivot Table. Here a dialog will show you where the data is coming from, and you want to use the data model in this workbook and place the pivot table into this worksheet. Click OK, and you will get a skeleton pivot table with nothing in it, and then you will also get an options panel here to be able to construct your pivot table. In this box here you have all the data tables, and these are the queries that you need to use. Down here are tables, and that's the raw data. That's the raw data that's not been structured yet, so you could use that, but it won't link to any of these other data sources. So for example, if we wanted to ask the question, how many wound infections did we have over the last year, and how many per month did we have, you would start by, first of all, going into the admissions table, which is the highest in the hierarchy, and first of all construct your timeline. So here we have some date fields, and we're going to add year, and then we're going to add month, so you can get both year and month. Then we are going to go down to our complications table and find the field that's going to allow us to select just the wound infection. So that will be the complication description table, and we put that into the filter because we want the whole table to be filtered just for wound infections. And you get this up here with a selector. If you click on that, this is where we can filter out just wound infections. So wound infections come in different sorts, and there's not just one code in DIVA, so we need to select multiple items and search wound, and here we get all these different wound complications and things, and we're going to put them all in. So we click OK, and now we've filtered for just wounds. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to create a count against these months, and the best thing to do is select a field where there's always going to be data. So in this would be the complication ID, because there's always an ID. Put that into the values section, and now you have some data showing, but this is not correct because this is adding up the complication ID, and we want to change that to a count. So we select this and go to value field settings and change it to a count, and now you can start to see something that is meaningful. Then to create a chart to visually represent that, you can select any cell within the pivot chart, pivot table, go to Insert and create whatever chart you want by just clicking on that, and instantly you have a graphical representation of what's in there. Now, for example, say if we want to now compare ourselves versus everyone else in the unit, just like on the previous charts, we need to then add a field to separate that data. And that field would be lead consultant up in the admissions table. So we drag a lead consultant down into the legend area of the pivot table, and now it's splitting up into anonymous versus Alexander Fleming, and then also showing the grand total. And then it's also automatically split the data up down in your chart here. So that's the really powerful feature of pivot charts. Probably the one limitation that is in the method that I've just shown you is that in the value field settings you're limited to sum, count, average, max, min, and sometimes you want other things like median, or you want to divide something by a different denominator. Well, that is also an advanced feature, and I'll point it to you, although it really requires quite a lot more reading and training. But if you wanted to, you could, for example, do it by right-clicking on whichever table or data source you want to drag the data from. Right-click on it and add a measure. And this measure will open up something called a DAX formula thing, and you can start to add in other things like median, for example. So median, and then the median would be the hospital length of stay, and there's is shown there. So that's how you create measures. It can get very, very complicated, and there's lots of help on Google, but explaining how to use it is outside the scope of this video. But this just goes to show you how powerful this can be, and if there is a data question that you have that's not answered by these sheets, do get in touch, and we can tell you if it's just a way to make a pivot table, or whether you actually need other data that's not in here. So you might have noticed that there's no data on diagnoses, and there's no data on non-operative interventions, and we've eliminated that data or excluded that data just to keep the data size, the size of the file down. So do let us know how you're getting on with this. Click on the feedback link, send us an email and let us know. Thanks.